Guys, the dry mouth is real, y'all, and I have pressed re-record probably like 3 or 4 goddamn times. But hey, welcome to another episode of the Magpie Witch Podcast. I am your host, Ashley, and today we're going to be talking about portals. Before we get to portals, though, I would like to take care of some housekeeping. You will notice that if you are watching this podcast, rather than just listening it, you will notice a time-lapsed video of me drawing actually the thumbnail for today's episode. In the future, I am actually going to, I'm planning on making those time-lapse videos and those drawings eventually into some merch, like t-shirts, tapestries, all that stuff. But actually, I'm learning still how to draw on a tablet, because I'm a more traditional girly. I like to paint with actual watercolor, I like to draw, I like to wood burn, and have physical tools in my hands. But you will notice the thumbnail is digital art, and it might be a little bit rusty. Any hoozle, so I wanted to have something in the background, and I thought that would be a good kind of background video, at least until I can get a better camera, right? Because right now, I just have my laptop camera, and if I try to videotape myself, it would be infuriating for y'all. So at least you have that to watch. So, yes, so I'm going to be doing time-lapse videos of me drawing, might be thumbnails, might be designs for future merch, and then I wanted to discuss Thursday real fast before we get into today's episode. Thursday, do stay tuned for that. I am going to be talking about being a practicing witch while also having, dealing with chronic illness. So, oh gosh, you probably hear my cat, hi Merlin, making his episode debut. Jumping around in the background and meowing and doing usual kitten things. But, anyhoozle. So yes, Thursday's episode is going to be about practicing magic when you are a chronically ill witch like me, and we'll discuss the struggles, how I cope with it from my own personal perspective, and yeah, I feel like we just need to make that much more well-known and easy to talk about, because right now no one wants to talk about it, right? Anyhoozle, alright, let's get into it. Okay, so portals. What are portals? We see portals in, fantasy movies and sci-fi movies. We may have heard of, say, if you're watching, like, Ghost Adventures, you might say, oh, that cave's a portal to hell. Or you might see on, like, some magic-y show, say, maybe like Sabrina the Teenage Witch, the newest one, let's make a portal, and they'll draw like a circle or something with like a crystal or a wand, and it's usually this like super epic thing where it's like, oh my gosh, there's a door opening to the other world, guys, what's happening? Well, in real life, portals, there is some truth to that, especially in the ritualistic way as, conjuring up your own portal. Obviously, it's not nearly as freaking sparkly, which sucks to me, but portals are still a kind of an integral part to witchcraft and something that y'all at least need to be aware of. So before we go into the meat of the portal discussion, I want to go ahead and address circles. And hopefully you'll see the connection soon. But I want to address the sacredness of the circle. And why aren't we, say, making portals out of squares or triangles or any other shape, a freaking trapezoid, right? Why are we making trapezoid-shaped portals? Why are they all circles? Well, so I did go ahead and do a little bit of research for y'all for this episode. If it's not correct, do fact check me if you feel the need to do so in the comments, but we are going to go ahead and jump right into just a smidgen of sacred geometry. So, circles have always been observed as being sacred. For example, and I might be saying this wrong, but you have the Enzo circle, or a Japanese symbol that resembles like an incomplete circle. Enzo happens to be one of the most important symbols in Japanese Zen, at least as far as my research took me. It reflects an experience of transformation, the revolution of the spirit without beginning and an end. So far, at least with the Japanese symbol, the Enzo, we see this sort of liminal definition starting to be developed a little bit. Let's go ahead and look at the Ouroboros, a symbol that we see in Norse, Greek, Aztec mythology, Egyptian mythology. It is a depiction of a snake eating its own tail. So that one, I've actually wood burnt into one of my own little altar pieces to make my own kind of permanent portal in a way. But this snake symbolizes the eternal renewal and the constant stages of life and death. That constant in-between stage, right? The constant, wheel of time will never stop turning. Okay, essentially that's what the Ouroboros is. And essentially, again, probably oversimplifying it, but essentially that's what a circle symbolizes, like in various cultures. There will be nuances, there will be slight differences in definitions and stuff, but if we just look at the circle and we look at a very basic definition from a lot of different religions and practices out there, the circle is this liminal shape. It's this constant, there's no end, there's no beginning, it just is. Okay? So let's go ahead and go a little bit deeper. Okay, so I am probably going to say this horribly wrong. This is a term coming from the realm of sacred geometry. The Vesica Piscis. The Vesica Piscis. Again, probably saying it wrong. But it is a sacred geometry symbol that is kind of like the shape of a football or your eyeball. That's basically where two circles intersect. So like the middle of a Venn diagram, if you remember what those are. If you remember what a Venn diagram is, it's that center intersection. That is the Vesica Piscis. And in general, it symbolizes the dualities that keep the cosmos running. So oftentimes dualities between like life and death, heaven and earth, yin and yang, black and white, polar opposite things. That is essentially, at least my takeaway, what the Vesica Piscis is. And what I found really interesting in my research is from here, all of, at least from what I saw, sacred geometry kind of branches out. And from this one thing, the Vesica Piscis. So what I mean by that is, like, if you say look at the seed of life, or you look up the lotus of life, and those are two different flowers or shapes or designs from sacred geometry that heavily relies on this intersection of two separate circles. We can see that in the witch's knot as well, and then we can also see that in the triquetra as well, the Vesica Piscis from different circles. So, and another thing too from my research was the circle represents the spiritual realm, and then the square represents the earthly realm. So, of course, if we're going to try to be building, going back to portals, of course we're not going to make a square if the overall connotation with the square is it's very grounding, right? There's ends, there's corners, there's nothing inherently liminal about a square. Whereas with a circle, there's something inherently liminal because there is no end, there is no beginning. It does have this heavy connotation of being the in-between, right? The shape that kind of brings us all together no matter what realm, no matter what life stage you're part of. This circle represents all of that. It represents all of our collective life forces going in and out of this reality. Okay, so just from sacred geometry alone, if we look at how they view circles versus squares, I hope that you can now see the connection and how to how we would use circles in our craft, and specifically in regard to portals. So I wanted to go ahead, now that you have that tidbit, I wanted to go ahead and go back to the portals, right? So a portal can be defined as a doorway, gate, or other entrance, especially like a grand or imposing one. And I took that, I'll be honest, I took that straight from Google, okay? Just looked up what the hell is a portal, straight from Google. But what we can see just from that very simple definition is, again, a gateway, a portal. Gateways, entrances, exits, anything like that, where you're transitioning from one setting to another. So if I'm walking from my outside of my camper, and then I walk through the threshold of my door, and I move into my camper, that threshold, that door, that gate, that portal is serving as a liminal space for me to transition between two different areas, okay? Now, before we go into how we're going to make our own, let's look at potential portals in nature, okay? Have you guys ever been on a walk out in the woods and you go under, like maybe there's this branch of this tree and it just arches real, like in a grand way, over the front, like the path that you're having to follow down, the hiking trail. Like say you have this huge, grand branch, right? Hopefully you can visualize that, okay? And maybe you are taking a spiritual walk. Maybe you already are going for a walk with intention. Meditative walking, maybe you're going on a grounding walk, whatever the case may be. You're going on a walk outside, you come across this giant arching branch, and you are already in tune, hopefully. You might notice an interesting difference of energy and how it feels when you cross the threshold under that arching branch. And in that case, you could probably consider that a portal or a gateway in some way, right? You're going under a threshold, you're moving, you're transitioning from earlier in the trail to a little bit later in the trail. There is this little liminal space, you had to go under the branch. Maybe that was a threshold, maybe that was an energetic threshold. I mentioned the branch thing specifically, and this is a huge tangent, but, wow, this is going to be a giant tangent. On guardians, like guardians of the forest, or guardians of, say, a graveyard, or guardians of any sort of outdoor area where, like, there are a lot of trees, or a lot of arching sort of plants. Like, maybe there's a vine that's just completely taken over an area, and it creates this, like, overarching kind of weird tunnel that you gotta go under. That could potentially be seen as a portal or a gateway, strongly depending on the area, one. Like if you're in the middle of a park that's really small and it's in the middle of like downtown Tacoma, if you know, okay, I've lived there. If you know, like a middle of freaking hilltop, probably not super sacred, probably not going to find terribly too many, entities out there, just because that park has really been taken away from the whole point, which was to connect with the earth, right? That park has now turned into, in the case of Tacoma, a tent city, or, whatever. If you go to, say, like a park out in the middle of nowhere, or a little bit away from civilization, you might have more of that presence there from, across the veil, or you might have more entities from the land that are at that park. Okay, or guardians of that special space, right, of those woods. The reason why I mention those guardians is because oftentimes, if there is a guardian present, that threshold, that archway, that branch in this scenario, oftentimes is actually delegated to be the threshold of the woods, like the energetic threshold of the woods. Have you ever gone through, maybe you were walking through the woods and all of a sudden you got to a point where you're like, I don't think I should keep walking this direction. And there happens to be another branch. or something else, creating like a natural archway. And you're like, I don't think I need to cross this threshold. Or maybe you do cross it and you totally ignore your first thoughts. You cross it, and then something bad happens, like you trip, or a bird craps on your face, or whatever, right? That was a gateway. That was a portal. That was a barrier that was created by whatever entity that was there, be it the guardian of the woods, be it just another earthly entity that watches over the area or that, territory. That little archway was serving as a portal. Okay, so getting off of guardians, getting off of, branching gateways, branch-type portals. What about other more maybe man-made portals? Okay, why don't we look at, say, Stonehenge? And I'm not going to stay, on Stonehenge forever because I feel like everybody uses that as an example. But that is it's in a circle, and it's man-made. And we all know that so many different rituals have taken place there, right? Maybe we don't know the nature of the rituals or the specificities of it, but we do know that it is a circle, like we discussed, so we're bringing in our sacred geometry, and it is man-made. And the reason why I'm starting to bring in the man-made stuff is because we're now going to start to get into maybe how do we make our own portals? Or what are some portals that we have maybe unknowingly made? I'm looking at you, mirrors. That we've maybe have unknowingly made, or knowingly. So, like, for example, I did just mention mirrors. That is, I would probably argue that's a whole other different kind of portal in itself. Obviously, also not every mirror is a circle. But I thought mirrors, and especially because it's on my thumbnail, especially because I drew the freaking thing, I thought I'd mention it because it is technically a portal. Huge, right? Especially if you put two mirrors facing each other in the same room. Oh my god. Don't ever do that, by the way, unless you just want things to start falling off of your shelves. But, yeah. So, like, for example, if you work with runes, you could go up to your mirror and say, like, your bathroom or your bedroom if you have a mirror, and you could put, like, different protection runes. Or say you wanted to invite certain entities in and leave certain entities out. You can kind of create sort of a filter using those runes. So, like, safe travels, but also protection runes and things to ward off evil, but also things to enhance the energy of those that you do want to travel through it. And I'm looking at actually my wood burnt piece that I made that I mentioned earlier in this episode with the Ouroboros around it. Yeah, I have the Ouroboros around it. It's on a piece of wood, a circular piece of wood, burnt around it, and then I have, let's see here, as above, so below, I invoke thee, but I wrote that in Latin, and then I have a whole bunch of different runes on it. So I have, I'm not going to say specific names, mostly because I'm personally still learning the names of the runes, but I do have the different meanings on there. So I have things that I made for safe travels, for warding off evil, for enhancing sort of the transparency of the veil. And then in the center, this is probably going to be really gross for some of you, or hell yeah from a lot of you, I hope. But in the center, I then had burnt an eyeball to, like, symbolize, seeing stuff. And in the pupil, I sealed it with a drop of my own menstrual blood. Because then that ties it back to me. I really like it. On the top of it, I have a dark moon burnt into it on the bottom, or on the top, depending on how you spin it, because I like to spin it with the moon phases. I then have a sun, and so you just kind of spin it depending on whether it's a dark moon or the, not. And it's become, honestly, a really great conjuring tool. That was also its own huge tangent, but my point is that you can make your own portal. You just gotta know the symbols, right? And that's what we're getting into now, is how do we make our own portals? Why do we want to make our own portals? What's the whole point of that? Okay, so go back to, if you've seen Sabrina the Teenage Witch, be it the OG one or the new episodes, or any witchy show, honestly, You would probably have seen at least a scene where they took some chalk, took maybe some salt, took something, and drew a large circle with that salt or that piece of chalk. And then they may or may not have put a pentagram, the star, right? The witchy looking star. Pentagram. I always get those mixed up. Don't hate me. You know what I'm talking about, though. They'll put the star in the center of the circle. And then they'll put some candles around it. And then, hallelujah. We have, maybe not hallelujah because it's whatever. But, but they have then they have made their sacred space, right? You might have learned or heard, in some witchy books, now you need to make your sacred space. Well, in a lot of cases, that's what they're visualizing when they're writing that is, create your sacred circle, create your sacred space. What does that mean, though? What does that mean, create your sacred space? Well, if we go back to the idea of portals, the liminality, the inherent liminality of circles, and the whole point of portals is to be that transitionary zone, that gateway between realms, okay? Why would we want to step in a circle ourselves? Well, maybe we want to have like an area of very concentrated energy. Creating that circle, that sacred circle, and then, if you happen to call in the different cardinal directions, or maybe you light some candles to kind of create more of that ambience, but also fuel the atmosphere with that energy of that burning flame, or maybe you smoke cleanse the area, or whatever. You're putting massive intention. My point is you're putting massive intention into creating this circle, into creating this sacred space. You are creating a portal when you do that. Maybe that wasn't your intention, was to create a portal or a gateway. But when you create that sacred space, you are creating a portal. So then you can, a portal in that case, through the veil. The veil being the thing that keeps us humans from freaking out when we see a fae, or freaking out because there's another weird cosmic entity walking down the street. That's why we have the veil. Now, some of us, me included, kind of have that veil thinned, right? Like, I have always been able to see stuff without any sort of pre-work, right? Without creating a sacred space, without creating a circle, without whatever. I have always been able to just see stuff, the veil is thinned. But my point is that you're creating that sacred circle because you're trying to create that gateway through the thin veil, so then your magic workings can be all that much more potent or effective, or whatever you want to call it. Or maybe you're going to meditate in that circle, and so now because you're in the circle, it has made it all that much more easier for you to hear the messages from whoever you're talking to. Or maybe you want to do spell work within that circle. Well, if you put all of your intention into creating that gateway on your floor, creating that area of super concentrated energy, because you have essentially stabbed through the veil temporarily by creating that circle, your workings are going to be enhanced just naturally, just naturally, because you made the gateway. That's essentially why it's important. Or say you're going, I always use the woods as an example, but you know what, us witches, we just like to be out in the freaking woods. Just give me some boots and a snack, and I'll be out in the trees doing God knows what. But yeah, say you're out in the woods and you're trying to commune with your ancestors, or you're trying to commune with the land spirits, or maybe the guardian at the threshold of the forest that you're visiting, like I mentioned earlier. Maybe you're trying to commune with the guardian. You could potentially try to create yourself a portal, and in that moment, maybe you would create a ring out of rocks. You could try to gather some rocks and create a ring out of that. You could maybe gather some sticks or some leaves or any other sort of natural debris or material that you can gather, and then make a circle out of that. that, besides, say, the park was like super populated and people who are not in the practice are going to probably stare at you. But beyond that, yeah, that would be like a really effective way of creating like that direct energetic connection to that guardian, was to somehow commune via creating that sacred circle. Now, before any of y'all come at me, you don't have to create a sacred circle. You don't have to create a portal. You don't even have to, I don't know why you're listening to this podcast beyond maybe just morbid curiosity, but like, you don't have to incorporate that into your practice. But it is at least important to acknowledge its existence in case others around you do create those and you would like to understand what's going on. So we can have natural portals, right? We talked about natural portals with just like trees, for example, or not even trees. Maybe there's like a perfectly oddly circular pond next to you, or maybe there's a fairy ring, made with mushrooms that's created an entire ring of mushrooms. Those are your more natural portals. Maybe you want to make your own portal and you're in the woods or you're in somewhere in nature. Anything that you can honestly just create a circle with. You can even, in your head, just visualize, create, like stepping into a bubble, like one giant bubble that encases your whole body. You can even just visualize that, like in a pinch. If you need to have, you're magically inclined, your sacred space, and you have literally no other materials, you can honestly just visualize a bubble around your body. And if your intention and your will is strong enough, that visualization of a bubble around your body should be enough. But for the sake of creating a portal, you're going to need some more materialistic tools. And they can be extremely simple. Okay, again, like I mentioned, you can literally gather sticks outside and make a portal that way. You don't have to go out and buy a whole bunch of fancy rocks and fancy tools to make a portal. Okay, stem a piece. Any hoozle. How do we do that? So for me, I'm going to give you a step-by-step as far as like what I would do. So if I'm trying to have sort of a sacred working, or I'm trying to do a ritual, or say for like example, and I'll have a much more in-depth podcast probably on Halloween and what I'm doing for Halloween, but say for example, you're trying to summon something on Halloween, which is coming up very soon, but you're trying to summon something. Okay, so for me, what I would do is I would first smoke cleanse the area. I personally like to use mugwort. Mugwort is a wonderful herb to both cleanse the area, but also in Irish and more broadly Celtic folklore, it thins the veil. It's very magically enhancing, mugwort. So I like to bring mugwort. If you don't want to bring mugwort and you still want to cleanse the area, you can do so with sound. So say you have a bell, or you can walk around clapping, or you can walk around ringing your bell, clapping, and then like cursing out everything out of there, like, get the F out of my house, only good shit in this house, whatever. That works too. But you want to cleanse the area, okay? You want to make sure everything's nice and clean, energetically, alright? Then what I would do is I would gather my tools. So my specific tools I like to use for my practice. If you don't have these tools, don't feel obligated to run out and buy them, okay? I have gathered these and purchased them and also found them over many years. So I didn't just go out and spend hundreds of dollars all in one shot, or spend hours of my time all in one go to find all my stuff, okay? So don't panic if you don't have this stuff, okay? But I would gather my tools. So I have a selenite wand that is wrapped in copper. I have my different representations of my elements. So for water, it would just literally be probably a shot glass just filled with some water. Or an ammonite shell that I have. Again, I love fossils. So I'd probably use that to represent water. For fire, I have a little tiny, and this came from my dad. So if you listen to a previous podcast, I talked about my dad being totally into geology and how I love dinosaurs, any hoozle. So for fire, I have a little tiny vial of ash that is supposedly the ash that came about during the Great Extinction event, that killed all the dinosaurs. The giant meteor? Yeah, that's supposedly from that line, right? That layer of sediment in the Gulf around that area. Supposedly, that's where that ash is from. So anyway, that's my representation of fire. Let's see, we have water, fire, air. I just have so many feathers, so I usually just find probably my favorite feather of the moment, and I'll grab that. And then, let's see, earth, probably a plant that I have, or depending on the nature of the spell work or the ritual that I'm doing, I might just pluck a leaf off of one of my plants because of the energetic sacrifice that naturally comes from that. So we have, let's see, I'm so sorry guys, my memory is shit right now. So we have earth with the plant, we have fire with our weird epic ash, we have water, which is just probably a shot glass of water, and air is going to be our feather, and then spirit. Usually with spirit, I will either just have myself as that representation, because again, we all have spirits. On that note, we also have all 4 elements within us. Earth being the iron, fire being the literal electricity that runs through our whole body, that runs our systems, our nervous system. Earth, fire, water, we're at least 70% filled with water. Air, the air we breathe into our lungs, and obviously spirit. So again, you don't have to have any tools. I'm just throwing out the tools that I like to use, right? So I just told you, if you don't have any tools, your whole body literally represents everything. But I like tools because it gives me that visual. It gives me that visual, and it helps me personally just focus where I'm specifically going. So I'll put all my elements in their respective areas on each point of the star, if I happen to make a star, or just in the general direction on the ring, on the circle itself, where it corresponds to. So I think north is fire, north. I'm the worst. Again, I'm not a Wiccan, guys. I'm not a Wiccan, and usually I personally don't do the star thing, but I'm telling y'all about the star thing in case you want to. Not necessary, though. The circle, necessary. Star, not so much. So anyway, I have my elements. I have my candles circling around because I like to use the fire to literally energize the atmosphere. And then I might, after I cleanse and I set it up that way, I will either get an offering ready if I haven't already gotten an offering ready, or I will go ahead and call in any entities that I am wanting to bless or help protect me. Right? Because protection is also incredibly important. When you're working with portals or creating your own portals, you gotta know what you're doing, okay? Because this is probably one of the more quote-unquote dangerous things that you could do in your practice, is creating different portals and not having the proper precautions. I guess cautionary tale, and I have never done this, but cautionary tale, anything can be a portal. So a Ouija board, for example, that's a portal, right? It is a tool that is being used as a beacon to pull in other entities, and if you don't close the communication off, just like in a normal conversation, that person might just kind of linger there for a hot minute, right? Until a conversation ends. So that Ouija board would be a portal. Just like with our circular portals that we've been discussing in this podcast, Ouija board, you also have to have different precautions or different filters placed onto that. So, yes. So we have our circle. We are going to draw it with either our sacred circle. We're going to either draw it in the air. Sometimes I like to draw it in the air with my selenite wand, the point of it. Sometimes I like to point my selenite wand out at the ground, kind of diagonal out, as if I'm pointing a flashlight right in front of me, and then just twist myself with the intention that wherever I'm pointing the tip of that selenite wand, I am literally drawing. There's like a beam of energy coming out of that tip and like drawing the circle around me. Okay, so I've cleansed, I've drawn the circle. You can ask entities to come protect you if you want. But then after that, honestly, it's down to you. So if you're trying to summon something, in this case, is there like a picture that you can draw of that entity? Is there an artifact that maybe they left behind or gave you that you can put in the center of that? So like a gift from an otherworldly entity? What? Does that even exist? Yes, it does exist. It just comes to you in the way of them kind of leading you in that direction and you finding something that you would never usually find in that spot. So you would put that artifact in the center, be it a picture of the entity, be it you just wrote down its descriptions, or its name if it happened to give you a name, or anything like that. That would be, a tag lock, right? So going back to our second podcast episode, you want a tag lock of some form that you put in the center, and then just say a few words. Depending on your practice, probably burn something. You could burn the tag lock. You could burn some incense. You could burn your offering. If you don't want to burn things, you could just have a plate of food or whatever offerings that you think that entity that you're trying to summon would like. Because again, usually when you're trying to summon something, you probably don't want it to come at you angry, okay? Especially if you're welcoming it into this realm. You probably want to make sure it's happy, so it feels taken care of. So yeah, you'll have your offering. How do we close portals? Once we have opened them, how do we close them? So you've done your ceremony, you've discussed what you need to discuss, and then now you're ready for the ritual to be done and the circle to be broken. So just like with any portal, just like, when I had that tiny tangent on a Ouija board, you need to close up that conversation. You need to say your goodbyes, officially. And probably for a few reasons. You need to close up the ritual and the portal to ensure that you do not let anything else come through it into wherever space. Because I'm assuming if you're making a portal or you're doing witchcraft, you're probably doing it either in your house or in your friend's house or somewhere in the proximity of where you live potentially, or where you visit often. Okay, so you really want to make sure you close the portal so you do not invite any nasty entities into that area. Okay. You also want to close it just because it's kind. Okay, like say you were on the phone with your mom and you're talking, everything's great. Maybe you asked for some help on something. And then you felt that the conversation was done and you felt everything was done. So instead of saying goodbye, you just hung up. Don't hang up. Don't just hang up, right? Because that's rude. So just like with a phone call, if you're making your own portal, be like, okay, you can literally vocalize out loud or in your head, whatever is comfortable, but make sure you actually say something along these lines. Thank you all for coming. I appreciate your help or your assistance on whatever matter, insert matter that you had to have help with here. I kindly release you from this ritual, from this circle. Any other entities that have been around that do not have my highest good as their priority, is not allowed here or must leave. And then say something along the lines of this ceremony is done and the circle is now closed, or something like that. You want to make it clear that you are ending the ritual, that you're closing the portal, okay? Now, this is what I would do next. I would then either, if I had, say I made the circle out of an actual, physical material, say I made the circle out of salt, or say I drew it on the ground with chalk or something, oh gosh, I should have mentioned this before. If you're going to draw I'm so sorry. If you're going to draw your portal, it's not the end of the world if you don't do it. But in a lot of different folklore, if you're opening something, if you're bringing something to you in your direction, you want to draw the circle clockwise, or you want to draw your sacred portal or your sacred circle clockwise. So I would spin, like if I'm drawing my portal in my mind's eye with my selenite wand, I would spin in a clockwise direction. If I was pouring salt on my floor or black salt or whatever, and I was making a circle that way, I would pour the salt in a clockwise direction. Okay, this is important because when you're closing the portal, you want to do it in the opposite direction. And that's just my own belief. If you don't believe that, whatever, that's fine. But my own belief is that you want to do it in the opposite direction. And traditionally, that is in the counterclockwise direction. So, and in general, this doesn't have to be just with portals. It can be say you're stirring your tea and you're setting your intention for the day. Stir it in a clockwise, stir it in a counterclockwise, depending if you want to bring something to you or manifest something for yourself, or if you want to close out a ritual or take away something or banish something. You usually would do it in counterclockwise. Usually. So, for me, I would summon my thing, talk to him, I would then close off the conversation in a polite way, wish them well and stuff, just as you would with somebody in this realm. And then I personally would then close the portal counterclockwise. So if I opened it with a selenite wand and spun in a clockwise manner, then because I am closing the portal, I am now going to hold my selenite wand at the same place that I started the portal, but instead, I'm now going to spin around in a counterclockwise form, as if I am picking up or erasing that portal. Now, if you poured something physically onto the ground, I hope that you've picked up what I'm talking about so far. Pick up what I'm putting down here. You would sweep away or erase the circle in a counterclockwise formation. Moving on from there, just make sure, honestly, that the room or the area that you have done your working in, if you have done all the simple precautions, making sure you've cleansed the area, making sure you've included some sort of protection while you're doing it, and then you have closed it properly, you should be just fine. If you do feel as if something is still lingering around, you can do another cleansing, followed by your choice of divination. So do a tarot reading, or maybe you have a pendulum, and just ask your entities or your guides, hey, is this being gone? Or hey, is this negative energy gone? Or can you get rid of this? Yeah. Yes. So, let's see here. So we talked about how to make a portal. We talked about a little bit on sacred geometry. I told you a wee bit as to why just circles in general are sacred as compared to, say, a square, right? Because if we look at sacred geometry, a circle represents the spiritual realm, whereas something sharp with edges and stuff like a square represents the earthly realm. Okay, so circles, as well as gates, are inherently liminal spaces. They are areas of transition where you move from one setting to another, or you move from one energetic vibe to another energetic vibe, or whatever. The key is, though, is that they are inherently liminal. We want to work with portals as witches, or at least be aware of portals as witches, because we can use them for our own work, right? Either to summon things, to enhance our magic, to enhance our spells, or we are at least now aware of the natural gateways, the natural portals that we might find that's either been made by other practitioners or even other entities in the natural world, such as those overarching tree roots or tree branches and or a crap ton of vines that make this weird little tunnel thing that you gotta walk through. Portals are everywhere, and just like with magic in general, it is your responsibility to be aware of them and or to know how to work with them properly. I think that's going to leave it there. please do leave a like. Please do subscribe. It does really help out. This coming Thursday, like I said in my beginning intro, I am going to be doing another podcast, and that is going to be on being a chronically ill witch and how to cope with that. I hope that you took away something from this podcast, be it just what the hell are transitionary zones, a liminal space, or how to make a portal. If you have any questions, comments, anything of that nature, please leave that down below. I have probably made this podcast way too long. I hope you all stay safe out there. I love you guys. Bye!